Hello everyone and welcome to our series of webinars hosted here in our virtual 67 Pall Mall. Tomorrow, MW's Richard Hemming and Michael Hill-Smith will be discussing wine about his Adelaide Hills winery Shaw-on-Smith and also his Tasmanian winery Tolpuddle. Then Edouard Auger MS will be giving us an overview of the Loire Valley and its wines. Following that, Luciano and Barbara Sandrone will be talking about their iconic estate along with our sommelier Fede Mocchio, one of the Barolo boys. And then finally, Jane Eyre will be telling us about her extraordinary story from Melbourne hairdresser to making her own label wines in Burgundy. But now I'm very pleased to have Duncan Meyers, who'll be joining us from Healdsburg to discuss his Arnot-Roberts wines. So do chat away on the side, share with us what you're drinking, where you're drinking it from, and also share on social media with #67FromHome. As usual, we'll have 15 minutes at the end, so please use the Q&A box rather than the chat box. So I hope you have a lovely bottle of Arnot-Roberts wine at the ready, and a big hello to Duncan. Hey, Duncan.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. It's an honor to do this, and look forward to sharing a little bit about Arnot-Roberts.
Great to have you here.
Yes.
I know Wink Launch is on the chat, and she's a big fan of your trousseau.
Hello, Wink. We have some trousseau for you today. Sorry, we don't have any Mondeuse. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I know we, us Californians, have a difficult time with that variety pronunciation, but we're trying our best to get better. And good to see you here. Cheers.
Right, well, thank you for doing this.
Yes, it's my pleasure. I guess I'll just jump in and start with a little bit of background about Arnot-Roberts. We started, Nathan Roberts, my partner, and I were childhood friends. We grew up in Napa. We've known each other since we were about 8 years old. We followed our own paths a bit, just out of school. Nathan went and followed his father into the cooperage profession, building French oak wine barrels here in California. And I went into, after school in Colorado, went into winemaking in different cellars around Napa, and then moved to Sonoma 20 years ago, where we started Arnot-Roberts in 2001. We started with one barrel of wine, and it was an old vine Zinfandel-based field blend from here in Healdsburg in the Dry Creek Valley. We bottled that and quickly depleted the stock amongst ourselves and our friends and family. And in 2002, decided to take things a little more seriously and move up to about 4 barrels of wine. And then you fast forward 20 years now, and this is our full-time profession. We're working with 16 different vineyards all around Northern California. We make 20 different bottlings, and today's selection, I think, represents a good cross-section of what we do. It's not everything we do, but it's a good view, I would say, into what we do. We work with passionate growers from Santa Barbara all the way to Mendocino County. That's paramount, really, in what we do, is the collaboration with growers that have a fantastic piece of terroir and are applying strict and perfectionist farming techniques to their sites. That's really the model, the only way that our model can work. We own one vineyard. It's a small Syrah vineyard on the far Sonoma coast. It is called K Syrah. It's one of the oldest plantings of Syrah on the Sonoma coast that we were very fortunate that Nathan, my partner, and his wife Jennifer purchased in 2015. So we have direct control over that vineyard. And we make everything ourselves, the three of us. It's Nathan, myself, and our assistant winemaker, Caitlin Quinn, who is amazing. And we do everything, the three of us. So we're a small operation. That said, we spread the wine out all over the world. And Roberson Wine sells our wine in the UK and has been doing a great job for 10 years now. We're very happy to see the reception in Europe, and finally started selling some wine in France this year, which has been a long-term goal as well. So we feel very fortunate to do what we love, and we hope that others out there enjoy the product of our labor.
Hey, and Duncan, I read a story that you and Nathan, you started seeing vineyards around Sonoma basically when you were younger on your mountain bikes. Is that true?
It is, and it's a wonderful way to get out into the hills. We have so many low traveled country roads that weave up into the mountains and into the canyons and places that you may find if you're out on a drive in your car, but on the bicycle you can really experience the topography, the geography, the weather, really directly. And I think it helped inform our decisions, just by being immersed in the weather and the topography on a bicycle is a really, really tactile way of getting to know your surroundings. So for us, it was a great avenue to exploring, and it still is. We still spend time in our spare time on our bicycles, and helps us explore and understand our surroundings that much more.
Great, good story. And is it true that one of you is related to the late Magritte Mondavi as well?
Yes, in fact, Nathan, that Margaret was his grandmother. She passed away a few years ago at 95 years old. She was married to Robert Mondavi. It was a second marriage for her and for Robert. So Nathan is not a Mondavi family, kid, but his grandmother was married to Bob, and I had the good fortune of getting to know her over the years, and she was an amazing woman. We sort of think of her as the first lady of Napa Valley. She really, along with Robert, helped promote California wine and really get it on the world stage. She was an incredible artist, and she did watercolor renditions, many botanical prints, and you'll see the flower logo, which is our logo on our front label, was a watercolor print that was made by Margaret for us. When we started the label, we thought, let's put our names on it. Arnott is my middle name. My grandfather was Scottish. Don't hold that against him. He was from Edinburgh. He passed away. He died in World War II. My father never got to know him. My parents gave me his last name as my middle name, so it's on the label as tribute. Robert's Nathan's last name. And then Margaret's artwork on the front, the fuchsia. It's a California fuchsia flower that adorns the front label.
Great. Good. So you have a presentation that you were going to show us as well.
Excellent. Well, I have some photographs, and I am happy to share those. I don't know if you want to jump into the first wine, we can do that because the photographs sort of coincide, but I will start with a couple of maps that'll give us a little bit of reference point for where we are. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a couple of maps to just get us oriented where we'll be talking about. Okay. Okay, so are you guys with me? Here I've got a map that's showing San Francisco Bay, and we've got the Santa Cruz Mountains down below. And this represents the southern reach of our vineyards. And we'll be moving just to the north of the San Francisco Bay here for the next slide, which will coincide with the first wine.
Yeah,
so here we are.
The first one is the 18 Chardonnay, the Watson Ranch.
Correct, 18 Watson Ranch. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but here's Watson Ranch.
Yep.
It's at the southern end of the Napa Valley. You see the coast of California here, and you see the northern edge of the San Pablo Bay, right close to Watson. So Watson is a very cool place. It's the southernmost vineyard in the Napa Valley, and majority of the vineyards in this region of the valley are harvested for sparkling wine. We knew that when we started to look in this neighborhood for fruit, because we knew that this was the coldest area where you would develop flavors slowly and maintain high acidity and freshness without having sugar run away. I love this site because it's very unique. There's young limestone in the soil here, which is very rare in the North Coast. In fact, there's very little limestone in California that is in the coastal region that can allow to give this great minerality to the wine, but having proximity to the cooling influence of the ocean. So I'm going to take you to the next slide, which is a photograph of the Watson Ranch vineyard in the background. And then you've got the soil here on the right. So you can see the exposed limestone, and quite thin topsoil here. It's very unique. This is an anomaly for the area. This vineyard sits just above the site of one of the oldest open pit limestone quarries on the west coast of North America. It was used at the turn of the century, just after, to mine lime to help create Portland cement to rebuild San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. So this was a really important site at that time. The mine and quarry are no longer operational, but is now home to what I think of as one of our top sites for fruit. We have now also planted 1 acre of Cabernet Franc here on the site. The first vintage was 2018, young vines still, but the promise is very high. Very, very cool site, very windy. The wine almost has a naturally saline quality, an inflection that I think comes directly from the maritime air that blows across the vineyard incessantly. It's a wonderful place to visit on a hot day because you walk up into this hillside and you can feel the cool breeze coming across. You can see the buildings in the city of San Francisco from the top of the hill. So you really have unobstructed maritime air rushing across this vineyard, which really moderates ripening and allows the grapes to really hold on to their natural acidity. We take the fruit and harvest roughly 12 to 12.5% of alcohol. We've seen it as high as 13, depending on the vintage. But we think the sweet spot for this wine is somewhere around 12.5 to capture freshness and energy, but still integrate some of that lovely California fruit and some body. It's got natural richness in the palate, just from being a, California Chardonnay. I think all of the Chardonnays have a little bit of natural richness to them, but if we push them right to the edge of where they're comfortable, we get that beautiful minerality. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful site. We're thrilled to work with it.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of your Trout Gulch Chardonnay, which I thought is fantastic. So I reviewed that for Decanter, gave it a very high mark, and then went and bought 6 bottles myself. And I've drunk 4 of them, and I really think I should leave it in the cellar. It definitely needs some aging, but it's
definitely. Yeah, in fact, I do think we make the 3 different Chardonnays right now: Watson Ranch, Trout Gulch, and Sanford and Benedict. And I think of the 3, the Trout Gulch lends itself to long-term aging. It really has the structure to go the distance. Our first vintage was 2011, and I just recently opened a bottle, and it's super fresh still. That shows 0 signs of age. It looks like it was just bottled. So I think that portends well for the future. Nathan and I both love Chablis. I think that's my desert island wine is top-notch Chablis, and we're certainly not trying to imitate or recreate. We want to make our own version in California, but we certainly have that as a high benchmark. And I think that, Chablis at 10 years of age, if stored well, is a magic place to drink Chardonnay. And that's certainly our hope with the Chardonnay that we're making, that we can have our customers enjoy it at 10 years of age.
And so the amount of time that you've spent in California, Sonoma and Napa, you must have seen a real U-turn in Chardonnay styles over that time.
Yes. I mean, the dominant style, I think, is still the commonly understood California Chardonnay. So big, rich, oaky, full malolactic with stirring of barrel, stirring of lees, made famous by several producers that will remain unnamed. But it's still quite popular. Understood that there's a time and a place for that wine, and people like it. but it is now more than ever. There are fantastic versions of more restrained. You know, you've got the Sonoma Coast, you've got Santa Rita Hills. I can name more producers now than I ever would have even 5 years ago, that are making a more, I would call it restrained, maybe less oak inflected, maybe less power and more precision, more intricacy to the wine. It's a wonderful time. I mean, you'll hear this as a refrain from me across all the varieties that we work with, but I think Chardonnay in particular now, there's more better Chardonnay now in California than there ever has been, for sure.
And do you actively avoid malolactic on your Chardonnays?
So yeah, I alluded to malolactic as being a contributor to richness, and it is. We allow our wines to go through spontaneous, natural malolactic fermentation. But the only way I think that we're able to do that is that we pick sites that are cool enough and have enough natural acid that even when they go all the way through malolactic, they still retain crisp freshness. What you have to do to stop malolactic from going through in barrel is fairly interventionist. You have to really hit it hard with sulfur. You really need to control the temperature. And for us, we would rather pick a site that happily, naturally completes both of its fermentations and still comes out the other end with tension. But that's our job, is to find those sites that can deliver that, because not every site will allow you. There are some warm sites that you would absolutely need to block malolactic fermentation to make a fresh wine. That's not our goal. We want a cold site that's harvested late with low sugar and goes all the way through.
Okay. Yeah, and the Trout Gulch, that's one of the coolest vineyards, isn't it, in California, on the Sonoma Coast? Sorry, in Santa Cruz. One of the coldest vineyards.
It looks like I lost your speaker.
Can you hear me now?
I got a bad connection. It says unstable internet connection. Something happened with my speaker.
Okay, we can hear you fine now, though.
I got you back.
Yeah, okay.
My speaker glitched. I'm okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, like we were saying, the Trout Gulch, that's one of the coolest vineyards in California, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Trout Gulch has been harvested into late October. It's quite cold. Its proximity to the Monterey Bay really acts as a natural air conditioner, and it really keeps things moving along very slowly in the ripening curve, which is great because you build flavor and intricacy in the wine without building excessive sugar. That's really the hallmark of any site that we work with, is having it close to the margin of where the variety is comfortable for ripening, and that we feel stitches more intricacy into the final wine.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the Chardonnay is delicious. Yeah, very, it has that saline minerality that you'd expect to find in things like Chablis.
Absolutely. And you can see these are the grapes here. We've got some irregular berry size. You can see some small grapes intermixed with the larger grapes. That's traditional hallmark of the old Wente clone, which is, you know, an old clone from Burgundy originally. This adds some texture and intensity to the wine. When you have these small grapes, you have a higher skin to juice ratio, and when you have a little mix of both, it really adds just that much more texture and flavor and delineation to the wine. So these are the Watson Ranch grapes, and then I'll take you to the next slide, which is an old vine from the Sanford and Benedict vineyard in the Santa Rita Hills. So this is, for the next wine, the Sanford and Benedict. This is a picture of a vine that's from the original block that was planted by Richard Sanford in 1971. We were very fortunate to get a phone call a couple of years ago from Eric Malaya, the wine grower at Sanford and Benedict, and he made 1 acre, about 3 tons, available to us to work with. And we started in 2018 was the first vintage, and a great vintage to start with because 2018 was phenomenal across California. But this is a unique and historical vineyard for California. Planted in 1971, making it one of the oldest vineyards of Chardonnay still in production in California. It's planted on its own roots, so no rootstock. It was dry farmed for the first 35, 40 years of its life. They added an irrigation line to potentially stave off effects of global warming and give the vines a little drink if needed to keep them alive. They still have not used that irrigation since we have been working with it. It's more of an insurance policy. But you can see the soil is decomposed diatomaceous earth, so young limestone, with a very loamy, very well-drained soil. So phylloxera was not happy in this soil, so the vines have survived. And it's really a historic site that we're very honored to work with. Some great wines have come out of this vineyard over the years.
Yeah, well, we did a webinar earlier with Raj Parr and Sashi Morman, and we were talking about the Sanford and Benedict quite a lot. And I guess really it's one of those things that you could consider to be a Grand Cru vineyard in California.
Absolutely, yes, and it's quite far from our home. Nathan and I discussed the idea of proximity when we work with, because we have vineyards all over Northern California, and we spend a lot of time driving between the vineyards, and Santa Barbara is just, it's so far away. But when we got the phone call from Sanford, from this vineyard, and we're being offered a parcel that's within the mother block, the best block of the vineyard, it's organically farmed, dry farmed, own rooted. I mean, we couldn't pass it up. And it's farmed so impeccably. In fact, in this picture, you can see the boots of the grower, Eric, and they're well worn. He's in the vineyard every day. We have direct communication with him. We visit a few times a year, but it's really a vineyard that is, it was planted before Nathan and I were born. It's been making great wine for a long time. So really our job is to not mess it up.
Yeah, delicious wine. You can see the richness. You can see the difference in the Watson Ranch and the Sanford and Benedict for definite.
Absolutely. And, both of the wines are made, as far as the winemaking techniques are identically made. So it is picked the direct to press with the whole clusters. We settle the juice overnight, and then the juice is transferred into a stainless steel tank where it commences natural fermentation, no inoculation. And we let the wine go through all the way to dryness in stainless steel. It can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. We let it go. We let it dictate its own timeline. And then we take the wine at that point and barrel it down into neutral French oak barrels. So at least 5-year-old barrels, preferably 7 to 10-year-old barrels, just because we don't want any oak input in the wine. The wine needs some time to unfold, soften the shoulders, breathe a little bit. But we certainly don't want any new oak flavor in the wine. We don't need any oak tannin. We're looking for transparency, and we think the clearest way to see the terroir of the site is through aging in neutral French oak. That's very important across the board for our wines. Other than Cabernet Sauvignon sees a little bit of new, but otherwise all of the wines we make are in neutral or concrete. Yeah, just to maintain that purity, we think.
And when you get the must, do you quite heavily oxidize it and then do a lot of lees aging?
We do. I do believe in the oxidizing the juice. I worked for, one of my mentors was John Kongsgaard in Napa, and I love the way he makes Chardonnay. It's very different than ours. It's much richer and bolder, but it still retains this incredible tension and minerality. I love the wines, and when I was working for John in 2003, he really stressed that component of the winemaking is to really get the juice exposed to oxygen early, and then allowing it to go into barrel with a lot of its lees, so that it can slowly, the yeast slowly degrades and adds texture and structure to the resulting wine. Absolutely.
Yeah, delicious.
Yeah, it's a great vineyard. We're very, very happy to work with it. 2019 is just bottled last week. It's tasting fantastic. So I think we're off to a great relationship looks like 2020 is already under a good start. We have good flowering going on right now, under good conditions. It's gonna be quite warm this week, so so far so good this year.
And sorry, Duncan, you may have said, but do you say that you truck the berries up, or do you truck the juice back up?
Yeah, the fruit, because it's so far away, the fruit is picked starting around midnight, around 1, between 12 and 1 a.m. The fruit is off the vine by about 3 a.m. and into a refrigerated truck and to our winery by around noon. Okay. It's the only way we could manage the logistics of a vineyard that is so far away. And it works quite well. If it's a warm night, the refrigerated truck, the transport will allow the fruit to come back down to temperature. We pull it off the truck, it's in perfect shape, it goes right into the press, and then we're off and running.
Okay, great. Well, maybe we could move on to the first red, the Trousseau.
Yeah, a lot of pictures of grapes here, all taken from my phone, very professionally taken from my iPhone here. So this next photo is Trousseau, and this is a grape that Nathan and I absolutely love. We fell in love with wines from the Jura in the early 2000s, and I think the wines of Jacques Pouffinet were extremely important to my understanding of wine in general, because they really opened my eyes to the potential of light-bodied red wine. Of course, Burgundy, Barolo, there's other light-bodied, lighter-bodied reds that have said something to me. But Trousseau, the first time I had a Trousseau experience where it looked like very light in color, it didn't look like it had a lot of structure, and the wine just absolutely over-delivered. And I believe it was a 2001 Jacques Pouffinet Trousseau from Arbois. It really changed my understanding of red wine. Growing up in California with big red wine and the 90s and power and intensity, a wine like the Pouffinet 2001 didn't exist in California. So we started to search for Trousseau grapes, which was an interesting journey. Took us several years of outreach to finally find the one vineyard in California at the time that had 1 acre of Trousseau, and that is the Luxinger Vineyard. That's the grapes you see here in the photograph. And this is a photograph taken on the day of harvest. So you can see the grapes, even at full maturity, don't completely color up. They are very thin-skinned and relatively low pigment. And so you get a really light-bodied expression, not a lot of extraction. Even when you leave the grapes on the skins for 2 weeks, like we do, you still end up with this very light color. And it's become a very popular wine for us. I think it's exceeded our expectations for the reception to the wine. And I think now more than ever, Californians and across the world, people are really embracing the idea of light-bodied wine. You can serve it with a little chill. It's lower in alcohol, this particular version, 12%. Something you can have with lunch. It's really versatile. You can drink with so many different foods or just by itself. We love it. And it's become quite popular. We've shared cuttings from this vineyard with many of our colleagues and friends. So it's growing now in Oregon at the Eyrie Vineyards with the Lett family. It's growing at Stoltman under the care of Raj Par. It's growing at Copan here in Sonoma County. Pax Maley has some growings, Jolie Lade. There's a list of producers now working with the variety, and it's fantastic to see the diversity. It's really exciting. So
yeah, well, that's extraordinary to find 1 acre. And it was the only Trousseau vineyard, 1 acre in California. So how many bottles would you get out of 1 acre?
Yeah, it was pretty neat. We got there was about 3 tons. So we had about 7 barrels. Not nothing, but the first vintage was 2009. Prior to that, the fruit had been sold to another winery that was harvesting along with Tintacao, Suzao, and Tempranillo, and they were making a fortified kind of port style wine, because the Trousseau is also Bastardo in Portugal. So you have the the ability to hold on to its acidity in a warm climate, which makes a really good addition in port. But Trousseau is the same variety. And so when we came to the vineyard, the owner of the vineyard, who's a Chilean immigrant who came in the 70s, he didn't know that Trousseau was a thing. He didn't know where the Jura was, and he thought it was just a port variety. And in 2009, when we made the wine, in 2010, we brought a bottle to him, and I'll never forget. We sat on the tailgate of his truck, and he looked at it in the light and saw the glimmer and the beautiful color, and his eyes opened, and he said, "The acre is yours, and if you'd like to plant some more, we'll do it for you." So we've since planted 4 more acres there, so we have 5 acres, and it's a good portion of our production now, and it's become one of our most popular wines. So it's fun. It's been a fun journey.
And Rene in the chat box is asking, where do you see the biggest difference for Trousseau in California compared to the Jura? Do you find them quite similar, or what are the differences?
It's a great question. I think surprisingly, there are more similarities than I thought. Despite the California sun and the often times fertile soil profiles, you don't see a big, powerful wine. It's still very difficult to make a big, intense wine, which is not necessarily the case with most varieties in California. So I think the inherent nature of Trousseau is to lead the winemaker by not giving too much pigment, and it's really your hands are tied. So it's been really neat. I've actually had the good fortune of being in the Jura and giving bottles of our Trousseau to producers there, and have them taste it and have them not believe that it's from California. And that's the best compliment. I love it, because it means that it's at least what we're doing is at least akin to where the grape is home. So that makes us feel really good. Technically the only thing that our vineyard here, Luxinger, has in common with the Jura is that it's the same elevation. So they're both around 450, 500 meters in elevation. Otherwise, totally different. But we have that in common, same elevation.
Right.
And here's this picture here is my partner Nathan sorting in the vineyard. So we go to all of the picks and we do sorting in the field. So instead of relying on a secondary sorting when we come back to the winery, we prefer to be there at the harvest and make sure that every cluster that goes into the box of fruit is perfect. It makes our job much easier at the winery, especially because we ferment most of our reds without destemming. So whole cluster fermentation. So really, we bring this box of fruit back to the winery and we spray off our feet with some high proof alcohol, jump in with our shorts on and tread with our feet. And so it's a great way to manually crush the fruit while leaving a lot of whole berries. Gives you a little bit of carbonic, a little bit of whole berry fermentation to just make the fruit pop. And it brings some tannin. We love the stems. More on that when we get to Syrah, but it's certainly an important part of what we do is the whole cluster fermentation.
Yeah. Well, it's got an extraordinary nose. It's a bit like sort of dried raspberries and coffee grounds, but it's got that slightly herbaceous character from the whole bunch, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a natural earthiness and almost a natural bitterness to the Trousseau, which we love, almost like Campari or like it tastes like a good Negroni. It's got a little bit of a bitter orange quality to it. I love that, like blood orange. And then there's this sort of almost like a steeped tea quality, like almost like an over steeped tea, like a little bit of a natural tannic bitterness. Yeah. And that's also partly from the stems, but also partly the variety. And I taste that in destemmed Trousseau as well. So I love that about it, because not only is it a light bodied red, but it has some structure, it has some grip, which really makes it go well with the food.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah, it's super. We really enjoy working with Trousseau, and it's I think it has a bright future in California. There's more planted each year, not a lot, but there's more being planted each year. Sandlands is making a fantastic bottling, absolutely top notch. I think I named a couple of the others: Jolly Lade, Pax Wine Cellars, Stoltman. Some great wines being made from the variety right now.
And we don't have the Mondeurs in the tasting, but can you tell us a bit about the Mondeurs that you're making?
No, we're not making any Mondos, not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
I know Wink will be upset to hear that, but no, I can recommend a couple, in particular, Jamie Motley. She is making an absolutely phenomenal Mondes that is coming from the Bien Nacido vineyard. To me, it's one of the most exciting young red wines that I've had from California in the last 5 years. It's fantastic. Definitely seek it out. Jamie Motley wines. Yep.
Okay,
Incredible.
great.
Yeah.
Okay,
We've got our hands full. We have our hands full. We have a lot of varieties, so we have to draw the line somewhere.
Okay.
So the next picture you see on your screen here is a kind of a classic picture of the Sonoma Coast. You've got the redwoods and the fog. This is a photograph taken from my iPhone as well. It shows you how good the iPhones really are. This is the area in the far Sonoma Coast where the Coastlands Vineyard is. And so it is constantly hammered by fog coming in off the ocean. And it's an absolutely stunning site and very extreme. I'll move to the next slide. Is a photo taken from the vineyard. So it's a bit dark in the foreground, but you can see the vines. And then in the background is the fog coming in off the ocean. So this vineyard really sits really at the edge of the continent, overlooking the ocean. And as a result, it's extremely cool. It's an extremely late ripening site, and just makes a wine of absolute transparency and just beauty, in my opinion. We've been very fortunate to work with this vineyard. It's mostly made by the Cobb family. It was planted by the Cobb family in the early 90s. It's one of the oldest sites of Pinot Noir on the true Sonoma Coast. And 2018 was magic, super magic vintage. Sorry, and so this site here just gives you an idea of the way the fog rolls in, comes in right off the ocean, and the vineyard sits at about 1,400 feet of elevation, about 500 meters roughly, and it's just above the fog much of the time. If it were a little further down the slope, it would never ripen. It would be too cold. So that's the magic, sort of almost like the tenderloin of the hill is the perfect location where it's just above the fog enough to get some sun to ripen, but close enough to that cool air that it really keeps everything moderated. We fermented the 2018 with whole bunches, 100% whole cluster, and then very light extraction. The wine has great color and depth, but it's not from excessive extraction. It's really just the nature of a slow growing cool site.
Yeah, it's pretty deep color.
Absolutely, and only 12% of alcohol, and picked in the very end of September, so quite late for Pinot Noir. Kind of many of these coastal sites we really need to pick, dictated by the weather. The season-ending storm usually arrives at some point early October into middle October, and we want to be able to pull that fruit in right before the rains come. And you almost can plan your harvest by looking at the weather forecast and seeing when that big storm is coming, because Pinot Noir really doesn't like to hang through very much rain. A little bit's okay, but thin skin, tight bunches, it can rot quite quickly.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a gamble always at the end of the season as to how long we can hang the fruit, because it's generally potential alcohol of 11% all the way into September, and we're like waiting to get it to 12 and a half maybe. So certainly not a warm site picked early to make a low alcohol wine. This is a site that takes a long time to ripen and still only comes in at 12% on a great year.
And what's the diurnal temperature range there, or rather than diurnal, but more the morning to afternoon temperature range on the fog line?
Oh yeah, it can be huge. I mean, you can see a 40-degree Fahrenheit shift between morning temperature and afternoon temperature. And it's amazing because that really is sort of the gas pedal on the ripening. So you've got the heat, and then it backs off, and then the heat, and it backs off, and it just slowly builds the tannin and the structure and the skins. it's magic. Instead of having a real steady, not very much diurnal change, which you'll see in some sites that are not quite as extreme, not quite as close to the ocean. But we really feel that on and off of the ripening gas pedal is magic. It really builds more structure and just overall intricacy in the wine. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a site that yields. The yields are low here as a result, and same for all of our coastal sites. So the fruit's quite expensive. You have to make it, economically viable for the grower. The price of the fruit, by the nature of the yield ratio, is going to be higher, and it's worth it, we feel, to work with sites like this that are low yielding and quite expensive. It really makes the farming paramount, because every cluster is valuable. The grower knows that, the vineyard workers know that, and that collaboration of winemaker, grower, and vineyard worker all being on the same page, for quality being the paramount concern, is really everything.
And do you have much influence, or do you need to have much influence on the growers to tell them what you want and the yields you want and that sort of thing? Or do they do their jobs to the level that you want?
Yeah, good question. I think it's very important for us to work with growers that don't need very much hand holding. Some sort of the kind of price of entry to some of these vineyards for us is that the grower needs to be already at a very high level. There's certain vineyards that we feel that we've started to work with that we feel have potential, that need a little bit of help and need some input. And certainly there are some, we work with 20 different vineyards. So there's some vineyards that are require a little bit more hand holding with the grower from us. But Nathan and I are winemakers, and the growers are professional growers. And we really try to collaborate with growers that are the best at what they do. And then our job is to take that fruit and to make it into wine. So it's a little different. There are, in Europe, I think you have vignerons that are in their vines every day, and they're working with their little parcel, and then they're taking the fruit and bringing it, and they do both. They do the farming and the winemaking. In our arrangement in California, it's a little different. We would never be able to work with the broad variety of sites that we do if we were to own them. Financially, we wouldn't be able to anyway, but we would never be able to have the direct hands-on time in all of these different sites. So we really do rely on the growers that are top notch, and the Cobb family here at Coastlands is a perfect example of that. I mean, we can walk into the vineyard and we learn from the grower more than the other way around. So it's I think that's a great way to create a great product, is to break up the roles from the grape to the bottle, and let everyone do what they're best at, is the best way to describe it, I think.
And I guess that a lot of those growers have seen a real demand for premium Pinot Noir in California over the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. The coastal sites have more and more attention, even from producers. You have Napa, Cabernet producers that have purchased Pinot Noir land on the Sonoma coast, and it's obvious that it's an amazing place, and maybe one of the best places on the planet to grow Pinot Noir, and Syrah, of course, I think, which we'll get to. So yeah, it's rarefied. There's only the topography is rugged and steep and exposed. Developing these sites is difficult and very expensive. So the demand is up, but it's getting more in the ground is difficult. And so just only little bits planted each year and things getting refined, and still a very rarefied commodity. Absolutely.
And Rene is asking in the chat box, you have very low alcohols, even for Pinot Noir. What would you say the main difference between your perception of maturity compared to other true Sonoma Coast Pinot Noirs that can be up to 15%?
Yeah, I mean, we do make a conscious choice to harvest the fruit at a potential alcohol that we feel comfortable with. I don't have a prescription for that. I don't have an exact number because it really varies year to year. It's hard to just say we'll never pick anything over 13%. As much as I feel that way, there's some years where the fruit is not ready, phenolically, physiologically not ripe until it gets to 13.5. I think much past, to draw a line in the sand, much past 13.5, you really start to move into these more mature flavors, more advanced flavors, which work well for some wines and work well for some people. But for us, we really enjoy the end of the spectrum that's a little bit on the cooler edge. And I feel like in California, we really know quite well what this end of the spectrum looks like with the high power profile. We're well versed in the flavors of, intense, jammy fruit and, plum and all these rich, powerful flavors. But over here at the other side, there's still some exploring to be done. And of course, you can go too far to that side too. And if you harvest something too early, you're not going to make a great wine. You'll just make an acidic, shrill, disjointed wine. So, but there's somewhere in between. And I think that for us, we really we strive for balance. I know it's an overused word, but we love texture and aromatic brightness. And so I think that you start to lose that when you get too ripe. And especially with Pinot Noir, it tends to, you'll get some raisining happening, some dehydration on some of the berries. And that flavor is very powerful. The flavor of a raisin, you can throw a raisin in your mouth, it immediately. It's got a strong flavor. And a little bit of that in a Pinot Noir fermentation can really shift the flavor profile in that direction. And so I guess for a physiological sign, we look for just the beginning of dehydration, and then we know we're getting very close to harvest. So because we want to explore this end of the spectrum, the leaner side of the spectrum. So in general, our Pinot Noirs are a little lower in alcohol than many of our peers. It's what we like to drink, and that's the way we make our wines, is work backwards from what we like to drink. So
yeah, well, the Pinot's delicious. I mean, it's very ripe on the nose, but then the palate is so focused and so tight, with a lovely acid and great tannin. It's super balanced wine with a great length. It's delicious.
Thank you, Ronan. Yeah, I think, again, 2018 was an absolute joy to work with. And I think the 2018 Coastlands has a long life ahead of it. I look forward to tasting this in 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the Syrah, or the Cabernet, sorry.
Yeah, let's move to the Cabernet. I like to do that before the Syrah. I think it works well. So you see the soil here in the photograph. This is the Phelim Ranch. This is an unbelievable vineyard, and it is right adjacent to the Montebello planting from Ridge Vineyards. Kind of a funny story. My partner, Nathan, was renting a home here in Healdsburg 20 years ago, and he was filling out his rent checks, and the address said Montebello Road, and he had never met the landlord, and he didn't know that the landlord had a vineyard. Well, one day the topic comes up that we're making wine. This is in 2006, I think. And Bud Phelim, the owner, says, "Oh, you guys make wine? I have a little vineyard on Montebello Road where we live." And Nathan said, "Oh, really? What is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's Cabernet Sauvignon, planted in 1979, right across the road from Montebello." And we sort of flipped and said, "Is there any way we can come and just take a look at it? We'd love to see the vines. It's an iconic area. It's really, for us, the Montebello vineyard has produced some of the most iconic Cabernets in the world, if in California for sure, but in the world, I think." So I'll never forget, because Nathan went and sent me a photograph on his little Motorola flip phone. And I remember seeing the photograph, and it was this grainy little tiny picture. And it was just like this. It looked just like this, with these rocks and this old vine sticking out of the hillside. And I just said, "Can we buy some? Can we get a ton next year?" I mean, that's amazing. I don't even need to walk in the vineyard. I can tell you that we should be working with this fruit if possible. And that was 2006. In 2007, Mr. Phelim agreed to sell us 1 ton of fruit. That was the first vintage, and it absolutely blew us away. It had all of the hallmarks of the Montebello next door, which is this interesting, cool, almost sort of an herbal, minty, sort of bay laurel, kind of this wild aromatic quality, coupled with intense power and texture, but high acidity. So it was this sort of magic combination. And starting in 2007, we were just completely taken with the vineyard. It's an unbelievable site. It sits quite high. It's about 800 meters elevation. So quite high by California standards for any variety, and very high for Cabernet Sauvignon. One of the highest elevation Cabernet Sauvignon sites in California. It sits on the top of a mountain. Here's another photograph of the old vines. You can see there's a little bit of virus in some of the vines. The color, this is right at the end of the season, so they're starting to show. But it's looking down. You can see this, this canyon in the background is the San Andreas Fault. So right here is where the San Andreas Fault runs north to south in California. And so geologically, it's a really diverse place. If you look at the soil map here, it is a quilt, a patchwork quilt, amalgam of dozens of different soil types. So you've got volcanic uplift, volcanic along with maritime uplift, and then intrusions of all different kinds of soil. So you can walk around in the vineyard and see different colors of soil. It's almost like in Burgundy in that regard, where the south-facing slope of the hill that you see right here in this photograph has a very almost pale kind of white, decomposed. There's some limestone in the soil. And then you move, 200 yards around the bend, and it changes to a darker red, more iron-rich volcanic profile. And then you move farther around the horn, and it's just rocky and cobblestones with chert and fractured quartz. And the vines are all growing differently in these different soil types, even though they're all planted at the same time. And you can taste the difference in the fruit based on the soil in these different portions of the vineyard. It's incredible. I think I often say, if I could take a customer or a wine lover into one of our vineyards, Phelim Ranch would likely be the one, because you can actually taste the difference in the fruit based on where you are in the vineyard. It's amazing. So we have 3 sections of the vineyard, and we harvest it all at once, bring it together. And to us, again, I think that just builds more layer in the ending wine. Very relatively high tannin, being grown on the top of a mountain. Very thick skins and small berries. Just a lot of power and intensity. Really, low yielding, 1.5 ton to the acre, maybe 2 tons on a really good year. So the vines are really struggling here. Obviously, they're just growing out of solid rock. So they're on starvation diet, which is great for the intensity and the power and for the terroir expression. We ferment with mostly destemmed with this vineyard. Often the set in the vineyard is loose, so you have a high stem to berry ratio on each individual cluster. And that leads us to wanting to remove the stems, because the stems just would bring too much tannin. So destemmed, whole berry fermentation, and then a maceration in tank of generally around 3 weeks on the skins. And then basket pressing straight to barrel. And the barrels for the Cabernet Sauvignon, we see maybe 10%, 15% new. And those are barrels that my partner Nathan builds. Let me zoom ahead real quick to a couple of the barrel photographs here. So Nathan builds these barrels. That was his job prior to working full-time with the winery, and he selects French oak each year and then builds the barrels by hand. So the only wines that we make that see any new oak are barrels that Nathan builds himself at the winery. So it's great. It's a nice degree of control that we have that's very unique for anywhere in the world.
And which forests are you getting it from? Which type of oak is it?
They're generally the center France forests. So we see Fontainebleau, Juppy. We have sometimes a little bit of Vosges. as well. The stave mill is in Janzac in the Cognac region. Okay. And the wood is air dried there for 2 years. And then we import it here. Nathan has a small barn on his property where he stores the wood. And then we can select the forest source based on the vintage. I mean, this photograph that you see here is the fruit is already in the fermenter. And we figure which forest we would like to work with, and then we can adjust the toast level according to what we're seeing as characteristic of the vintage. So here you have your main control of the flavor that you get in the barrel is from the fire and from the toasting. And we generally err on the lighter toast side of things, but we can dial that in and customize it to the vintage, which is a really, really nice degree of control. Most winemakers need to order their barrels a year in advance and just hope they order a variety of different forests and toast levels and hope for the best. Or they know what works well with their wine, their vineyard, and they just order that every year. That happens a lot. But it's really nice. We're able to make a last minute decisions and put the wine into the barrels fresh off of the fires. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so on a good day, how many barrels can Nathan do in one day?
He's pretty good, and he can do 2 barrels in one day. Okay. And that's a full day. That's a 10-hour of sweat and muscle. Yes. Yeah. I only included 2 pictures here. I have a bunch more of the whole process, but yeah, he can do about 2 barrels in one day. So it's a hard job, and I help the best I can, but honestly, it's quite dangerous. And I do my best to just help keep him hydrated, keep him fed, and just stay out of the way so that I don't hurt myself. We're talking big, heavy hammers and fire and metal hoops, and like it's, you know, there you can see this machine. He's got a cable drawn winch. So this is a hand crank winch. So the barrel is built kind of like a teepee to begin with, and then as the fire warms the wood, the barrel gets a hoop as he's stretching the hoop of steel around it, and then it tightens in on the bottom and it brings the barrel together at the bottom from the heat of the fire, allowing the wood to soften up to the point where it can be bound together. So like I said, I want to keep my hands out of that, but I'm certainly thankful to have Nathan as a partner that is, I mean, he's a master cooper. He's, you know, probably one of the only guys in California that does this exactly, making wine and making the barrels that the wine goes into. It's a really rare skill set to have together.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So,
well, so should we move on to the Syrah?
Yeah, let's do that. So Syrah is something that we love dearly. The wines of the Northern Rhone are, I think that's where my heart is. I absolutely love Cornas. I love Saint Joseph. You know, I like the rustic side of Syrah, and I love the cool expression of Syrah. And we've been making Syrah now 19 years, and we started the first couple vintages. We were working with Hudson Vineyard in Carneros. When I was working for John Kongsgaard, he introduced us to Lee Hudson. And at that time, we understood Hudson Vineyard to be a relatively cool site. Then 2005 came along, and it was a cool vintage. We picked a little bit lower ripeness than we had in the past with the variety. And it made this, for us, this just amazing expression of Syrah. It was aromatic and violets and pepper and, you know, this lovely bouquet, and it was textural and had great acid. And we thought, oh man, this is a cold vintage in Carneros. It's made the best Syrah that we've made to date. Maybe we should be looking for things that are a little bit colder. Maybe we should be looking for vineyard sources that are closer to the ocean. So in 2006, we sourced a vineyard in the Sonoma Coast appellation called Clary Ranch, which was a young vineyard at the time and planted quite close to the ocean. In 2006, we picked it in early November at 12%, not even 12% alcohol. And as soon as it started fermenting, it blew our minds. It was an absolute watershed moment for us. It was a moment that showed us that Syrah in California can smell and taste similar to our favorite versions of Syrah in the world, which is Saint Joseph, arguably, Cornas. And it really got us excited. So 2006 was our first vintage of a Sonoma Coast Syrah. And fast forward to now, and we're working with 4 different vineyards in the Sonoma Coast appellation. And this vineyard, this picture that you see here is taken last year, right on the day of harvest, from the Solas Vineyard, which is in the Vine Hill district, kind of close to Kistler Vineyards, in real sandy soil, real coastal environment. And then we have 3 other sites: Baker Lane, Clary Ranch, and K Syrah, the vineyard I mentioned earlier, which is out on the far Sonoma Coast. So they're all harvested separately, fermented separately with the whole clusters, no destemming. And then we blend them together to make the Sonoma Coast Syrah that you have in the lineup here. 2018 was absolutely, again, it's just, if we get one vintage like that in our lifetime, I'll be thrilled. If we see another one like that, I'll be that much more thrilled, but I'll be happy to take just one like that. 2018 was truly textbook and perfect for Syrah. I'm really, really happy with the 2018 Syrah Sonoma Coast. It's one of my favorite Syrahs that we've made. It really is the culmination of our journey from growing up in Napa to moving to Sonoma, to tasting Syrah from all over the world, to honing in on the best Syrah vineyards in Sonoma County, to making this wine. Half of the wine is fermented in concrete and aged in concrete as well. And we really think that brings freshness and real pop to the wine. So yeah, we take it from whole cluster. I love this shot. It's just beautiful. Kind of shows the bright green nature of the stems, which we totally embrace for Syrah. Fermenting with green stems doesn't scare us. And then you see the color, just this bright magenta, beautiful. And this is at 12% alcohol, picked in late October. So fermentation about 2 weeks long. And then it goes, this is a tank when we open up the bottom of the concrete tank. So you can see a lot of the whole berries still intact. This adds a nice fruit component because the Syrah is so savory and so meaty and peppery. When we ferment with a lot of whole berries, it really gives this nice burst of fruit to complement all of that savory side of the Syrah. When we're finished of about 2 weeks in tank, we drain the tank. Here is a picture of the moment that we open the tank after fermentation. And then here's a picture of our little basket press where everything goes into, and 1 ton at a time, 2 barrels worth at a time out of this little press. It's a labor of love, but we love the basket press. We really think that it's not very efficient, but it takes a lot of extra work to use such a small press. But it really gives us the hands-on feeling of the final stage of the winemaking process. Really is the pressing, and you can manually control the press, so you can literally watch the pressure rise. You can see the juice flow coming out of the basket of the press, and you really get a feel for, you can taste right there. Instead of having it thrown into a big press and punch numbers on a screen and set a program and walk away, this is really hands-on. It's essentially a glorified version of a hand crank basket press, and I think it makes a big difference in the quality of the wine.
And the wines are always a blend of free run and press juice.
Yes.
Okay. And would you ever think about doing single vineyard Syrahs? Well,
we do. So today, I think I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar here, we have 20 different wines. I kind of picked a selection I thought that were representative, and I'm quite happy with the appellation wine that we have here for the lineup today. But we also make 2 single vineyard Syrahs, the Clary Ranch, the one I mentioned that's in the Petaluma Gap out near Tomales Bay, and then the K Syrah Vineyard, which is my partner Nathan's vineyard, which is on the true Sonoma Coast, west of the town of Occidental. And those 2 make single vineyard bottlings. Robertson does get a little bit of that in the UK, and they're small production, so they don't receive a ton of that wine. Nobody does, but certainly the Sonoma Coast appellation wine we make with the concrete as well, to just push the fruit forward a little bit and have it be accessible for people to drink while they're waiting for the single vineyards to develop a little bit in the cellar. I think Clary Ranch and Que Sera both can use 5 years in the cellar before they really start to show. So the Appellation wine is something to get into right away while you're waiting for the single vineyard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you would never think about doing any Viognier co-ferment with the wines?
Ronan, we like acid. No, sorry. Yes, I mean, we have played around with Viognier in the past. In California, Viognier, unless it's in an extremely cold marginal site, is fairly low acid. It can tend to soften the wine further. Aromatically, it does bring a really nice, interesting component. I do like that. But the trade-off is that it generally can serve to lower the acidity in the final wine, and that's just not something that Nathan and I are looking for. And we did our first couple vintages of the Appellation wine. We had some Viognier, and again, the aromatic addition was nice, but the detraction was lower acidity. The wines didn't age as well, so no, we don't have any. We love the pure Syrah from the cold sites, I think, is the best answer.
Yeah. Well, so you work with so many different grape varieties, but I would guess that it sounds like you love Syrah more than anything else, but you can correct me on that if it's not true.
I do. I mean, I love grapes and I love wine in general, so I have a lot of favorites, but I think if you were to pin me down, you know, what one vineyard, I think this is the best way it's been asked to me before, what if you could work with one vineyard of fruit anywhere in the world, what would it be? And I think I would have to say Thierry Alleman's Chaillot block in Cornas. Okay, so there you have it. So I certainly would, it would be a tough runner-up with Le Clos in Chablis, but you know, Que Sera vineyard in Sonoma County is arguably right there, and we get to work with it, so I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. So it's funny because I go into wineries all around the world, and you know, you see lots of empty bottles up on winery shelves, and you see an awful lot of Syrah, awful lot of Côte Rôtie and Cornas on winery shelves. A lot of Pinot, but probably a bit more Syrah than Pinot, I would say.
Yeah, we have the same shelf at our winery. We call it our top shelf, and we add to it. We clear it off before harvest, and then we put bottles up that we have at lunch during harvest. And we kind of there's just 3 of us, and one helper at harvest, so 4. So we've got 4 of us to vote, and we either vote it up or vote it down. And every year it does seem like Syrah does hold a pretty good portion of that shelf. And it's just such an intriguing variety. I find it intrinsically very unique. It's just it's diverse. But in its best environments where it's grown, to me, it makes this amazing combination of power and intensity with elegance, and a kind of wild side to it, an exotic side to it that I just love. It just keeps me coming back. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, our journey to the Sonoma Coast has really been instructive for me, understanding California terroir and seeing where things, when you're at the edges, how much better the fruit is. And so I love the variety, and I think that the future is still bright for Syrah in California. I think we've been joking that you know, Syrah is going to be the next big thing for 20 years, and it kind of never really has gone there, but that's fine. It doesn't need to be the next big thing. I think there's enough people that love it and appreciate it, that the high quality sites and the high quality renditions will be well received around the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this last picture, this last photo here is just a working shot from the inside of the winery. So these are the barrels. This is Caitlin in the background, our assistant, and our little winery. And you can see these are all pretty old. This is the Syrah actually here, the Sonoma Coast Syrah. So all relatively old barrels, you know, 5-10-year-old barrels as well for the aging. This one needs to get cleaned, I can see, but that's okay. Yeah, so something we love dearly.
Yeah. Well, a couple of people have been asking who is importing your wines in France?
So we are the Graillot family from the Rhone Valley. Alain Graillot's son, Maxime, is importing our wine. He has a small importation company, and it's called La Bicyclette. And they are bringing in a few different wines from us starting last year. And they're based in the Rhone Valley, but I think they're predominantly selling to wine bars and to retailers in Paris and in Lyon as well. But yeah, it was a real honor to be approached by them, for someone that we have appreciated, the Alain Graillot wines forever. They've always been a benchmark for us. So to receive the invitation to be represented by them in France was a huge honor for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I love his wines as well, and it's incredible value for money. His straight Gros Hermitage is ridiculously cheap for how good it is. Anyway, Duncan,
I totally agree.
I can't thank you enough. It's been a real pleasure to spend some time talking to you. I mean, I'm a big fan of your wines. I think a lot of people at the club are big fans. All the sommeliers are big fans of the wine. So yeah, thank you very much for spending time with us on a Sunday afternoon for you, I think. But it's been a real pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronan, and thanks for everyone that tuned in. It's fun to be able to share what we do, and thank you, all of you, for the support.
We look forward to seeing you in London at 67 very soon, we hope.
I look forward to it too. Be safe and be well, everyone.